Yeah, like a lot of your friends are spending their Saturdays drinking mimosas, going to brunch, getting ready to watch college football. That's expensive. Like that use of time is very expensive. But if that's fulfilling and you want to spend some of your life doing that, just understand that you are trading a very valuable resource.
Hey everyone, my guest today is Patrick Ryan. Patrick is an incredible entrepreneur who founded Eventellect, which works with most major professional sports franchises in the States and even some in Europe. He's also an avid sports memorabilia collector and has become a little famous in that space for reasons you'll find out in the podcast. But so excited to have Patrick on. We have an amazing conversation about what it takes to be an entrepreneur and what paths you have in front of you. So tune in. He's very gracious with his time and just an exciting figure to be talking with. So hopefully you get a lot out of the conversation and enjoy it. All right. I'm here with Patrick Ryan. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk about the world of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, let's dive in. So you've had an incredible career. Can you maybe start by just giving the audience a bit of background on you? What have you been up to in the world, maybe since graduating college?
Sure. So I consider myself a sports entrepreneur, but my first job at a school was not in sports. It was in traditional outside sales, working for an antiquated industry, the printing industry. So I was selling for R.R. Donnelley, the world's largest commercial printer. Was then recruited over to Career Builder to sell online recruitment advertisements. And it was interesting because I was in the world of recruiting. Some people thought I was a headhunter or gave career advice. And so my current co-founder and longtime business partner and friend, because I was a career builder, he actually asked me for some career advice. And that's actually what led to the creation of Eventellect. He was dabbling in the world of ticket resale, and this was 2006. So, almost 20 years ago. He also had a job with the Houston Rockets, and he had a finance degree. And I just kind of asked him about the ticketing business and what he needed to grow it. And he said he needed some more operational help, maybe some capital help. And, so we kind of started doing ticket deals with teams on a very small scale. And I tell people the joke that the Cleveland Indians didn't make the playoffs in 2007. We probably wouldn't have had the capital or interest to kind of keep going, but we got very lucky. They went to Game 7 of the ALCS. We were also fortunate that shortly thereafter, StubHub, which is in the news recently because of their IPO, they were acquired by eBay. And we quickly realized that a Fortune 50 company being in this ticket resale space was going to really change things. And so we shifted our focus from kind of flipping tickets or calling on customers to sell them tickets. We really wanted to partner directly with teams to help them leverage all this distribution that was occurring and this new wave of people buying on apps. To our focus today, we still do a lot of that, of helping teams unlock distribution channels of where customers are shopping. But right now we're doing a lot more deep analytical work, helping teams better decide, ticket budgets, ticket forecasting, real-time dynamic pricing, and helping them optimize their overall strategy around, hey, what tickets should be sold as group tickets for a particular game? What tickets should be sold as season tickets going into the next, 2026 season. And obviously our teams are great at doing all that sort of work. We're an extra set of eyes because we work with 150 professional sports teams. We have a unique perspective. So we're kind of enabling revenue growth while also providing some tools and software and kind of budget capabilities to execute what we call unified ticketing. And so it started off as, I think, 8 Cleveland Indians tickets in 2007 has certainly, I think this year we will manage, I don't want to misspeak, but 10 million tickets.
Wow.
So yeah, it certainly grew past our wildest imaginations.
And I think you have another hobby on the side, right? Above and beyond just Eventellect.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm a very active collector investor in the world of sports memorabilia. And that's actually how my co-founder and I met, was chasing autographs at team hotels and at the Houston Astrodome. And I started looking at that space kind of as somewhat investable in 2013. And then in 2017, really started making investments in the space. And, as an investor, I do have equity in some companies that are trying to empower and enable the collectible space, whether it be from authentication to new marketplaces. But, my day job is in ticketing, and then I spend my nights playing with baseball cards.
Yeah. When you started at that kind of old school company in sales, at that point, did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur or start a business?
No, I mean, my dream was to be the CEO of a Fortune 100 company. And it really was just the opportunity that Ignacio presented that really kind of opened my eyes to just taking advantage of what's in front of you. And I will say that, like, look, I love being an entrepreneur, but I oftentimes think that some people don't. It's like the grass is always greener on the other side, right? I think there's some fantastic opportunities in the world today that don't involve kind of hanging your own shingle out, let alone the risk of it. But I will say I always had an eye on process improvement and innovation at so at that printing company, we literally would drive around and knock on business doors to get business cards to then set an appointment. And I went to the library one day and there was this thing called Research USA where we could simply type in, because we were assigned zip codes. And so, like, type in the zip code and get a list of all businesses. And, I spent maybe $15 in printing out all these pieces of paper, and then went back to the office and I set a record number of meetings, like my fifth week on the job. And the main reason it was like 99 degrees in San Antonio. It's like getting in and out of my car. I was sweating through my TJ Maxx shirt and tie. And I was like, I'll just rather hang out in the library and then make these phone calls. And so then, like, fast forward, like, so like, how'd you get all these meetings so quickly? I was like, well, there's this thing called the internet. I mean, this was 2003. So, like, and like, a month later, like, we all had access to Research USA. It's sort of funny. And so, yeah, like, uh, you don't have, like, look, follow rules, but, like, if you can find ways to improve things, do it. So, I mean, I sort of have a little bit of a history of, like, trying to not sweat through my dress shirt, but also finding better ways to do things.
Right. Yeah. There's got to be a better way. Yeah. Kind of pushing the boundaries there, not just being, locked into the existing way of doing things. I like that. So, Patrick, as you know, the audience for this podcast are college age students. They're looking at what opportunities they have after school. And so I wanted you to maybe put yourself in their shoes. So you're going to be graduating soon. What would you be thinking about if you had the entrepreneurial itch? Like, what would you go do?
Right. So, I mean, I do think, firstly, like, the two biggest assets to any business owner. And so, whether you're in outside sales or you're a software engineer or you're a marketing executive, like, you are your own business, right? Like, I mean, obviously Jay-Z well said, I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman. And I think it's important to look at yourself as a business and what assets and resources you have, regardless of whether or not you're quote unquote self-employed or a startup founder. And you'll quickly realize your two most valuable assets are your time, and your money. And figuring out that XY equation of, like, okay, because, time, your time multiplied by money actually kind of dictates what kind of leverage you can create. And so I think that you just need to figure out, like, where you're most efficient time wise. And we were joking kind of before hopping on this, like, you know, if there's a robust opportunity to drive Uber or work construction on the weekends, and, like, yeah, that might not be accelerating your, like, entrepreneurial path, but that's getting your bankroll up, you know, that's very valuable. So I think, understanding where the best place for you to spend your time to grow the money is very foundational from the get-go. And so I do think that, like, in terms of your first path out is, like, where are you going to create time? Where are you going to get money? And I think that, like, the road of, like, thinking that you're going to be in a boardroom pitching investors, like, that is not realistic. That's not, like, there's other ways to get capital and there's other ways to launch things. And I also think you need to understand, like, your drive. So maybe that's the other part of the multiplication table is, like, energy.
Mhm.
And, I've talked to, teams, like, their sales execs, they're, people around the same age group, and helping them understand that, like, Yeah, like a lot of your friends are spending their Saturdays drinking mimosas, going to brunch, getting ready to watch college football. That's expensive. Like that use of time is very expensive. But if that's fulfilling and you want to spend some of your life doing that, just understand that you are trading a very valuable resource in your time. I spent my Saturdays in San Antonio working on my lists and actually emailing people because I quickly realized that like emailing the CEO of a company at like 3 p.m. on a Monday was a fruitless effort. I was shocked at the number of replies I would get at 10 a.m. on Mondays. So I was willing to do that. And that's afforded me maybe some brunches and footballs on Saturday a little bit later in life. But understanding that equation of time, money, energy, and where you want to deploy it.
Yeah, no, I love that as an equation for people to keep in their minds. And I think you said it sort of equals leverage, and I think those are levers that you can pull on, right? And being aware of, hey, if I do this, there may be a trade off cost to it. That's really really helpful. Yeah, and I think there's this myth that you come out as an early 20 somethings, and you're going to be starting this company, but at that point, you typically do need to find something where you can gain that experience, you can learn from someone. And so it's not to say that's the only path, but I loved your example of, working on off hours, finding a job that puts some money in your pocket so that you can then go afford to do something entrepreneurial.
Right. And I look, I love Gary Vee. I've listened to a lot of his content. And um I do agree with the fact that like when you're young, the money part of your asset class, the time part of that equation is a lot bigger because you have more time when you're younger, both technically and also you generally might not have a family or you literally it's just yourself. You do whatever you want. And he's like, yeah, that's when you should be willing to fail a lot. I disagree with him is that there is a high cost of failure. It's like it is really expensive to pick yourself up off of the ground and like just mentally and emotionally. I did have a failed enterprise. Actually, I don't call it fail. I just say I hit time out on it and I'll come back to it. But taking people's sorority and fraternity shirts and making them into a quilt, that business was much harder than I thought. And it wasn't successful. So I had to stop doing it to like go back to doing something that made actual money. And so while that happened when I was 24, 25 years old, the likes of Gary Vee might be like, oh, that's the time to fail. But like that still sucked. Like that was still very expensive emotionally. And so what was nice about the ticket business was that we had opportunity to make money pretty quickly. Like, our since we founded in 2007, there's not been a single year, not even a COVID year, where we weren't profitable. So I think that's the other thing too, is like people thinking it's okay to fail and thinking it's okay to go into millions of dollars of debt, with other people's money just to have some high reward, high outcome. Like it's just not the necessarily the right mentality because it's taxing and it's really hard. Like thankfully we've never had, I don't call the gentleman who came in George, I shouldn't say gentleman, his friend, what a great guy, right? That's sort of formal, but like when he came in, he didn't really come in as an investor. He's like a partner right away, right? So like we've never had some investor breathing down our neck. I couldn't fathom what that would be like.
Very different from a Sequoia coming in and taking a third of your business. And yeah, you get to go celebrate that on Crunchbase or whatever, but it's actually you've just
Crunch.
diluted yourself.
Yeah, operative word is crunch. That Sequoia analyst is going to crunch you every day for better numbers. So yeah, your name gets to go on Crunchbase, but at what cost? So it's like think about things like what's going to make money. Yeah, I mean, like let's cut the crap. We're in this to make money. Like, what's the fastest path to making money? And also like that equation of like how profitable is, how scalable it is. I'd rather have a super profitable business that had no multiple or no exit than like a business where I was like sleeping on a couch for 10 years and then maybe it had a
Yeah.
1,000 time exit.
Yeah.
Like making money matters.
So that's like one of the new trends I'm seeing where, 5, 10 years ago, a lot of like MBAs, they'd be going to work at a venture fund or a venture backed startup. They're now looking at like buying up laundromats and rolling up these cash flowing businesses. I mean, you mentioned you don't just have to go the venture route and be pitching a venture capitalist to, find some money to start something, you said there's other paths. What did you have in your mind when you were
Well,
thinking
so
that?
look, I think it is fascinating to think about things like laundromats and think about those types of gas stations, businesses where there's some efficiencies to actually just getting them all using the same detergent, getting them to use the same delivery schedule. Like there are some real efficiencies being created there. And I will also say that again, getting into debt with or taking equity from like a Sequoia is very different than getting a small business loan for a laundromat, because a laundromat's a real asset. Like you can get like traditional small business loans for something like that. So like, and like quite frankly, just running a brighter, cleaner, more friendly laundromat might be a scalable business. So I think people wearing that hat makes a ton of sense. I think people need to suggest Itzler, right? So I'm gonna name all the names in the world of podcasting and motivation, right? So I mean, and by the way, I listen to them. No one's. I'm 45 years old. Never do I need to stop being motivated. So I do listen to all this stuff. Jesse Itzler did a video about like he put together a group of people to build a brand around pickles. And he's not saying that the world of pickles is broken, but there's not really been a real brand. Uh, Grillo is one, but like, like Vlasic is a very dated brand, but and then I was thinking about like toilet seats. I think I've used the same type of
Mm,
toilet seat for 45 years, like toilet paper, the bathroom experience, the laundromat experience, the gas station experience. Think of the success Buc-ee's has had.
yeah.
The other thing too that I think about in terms of businesses and like, America's had a love-hate relationship with the suburbs. Coming out of COVID, we fell in love with the suburbs again. What are things that the suburbs need? You know, and I don't know what they are, right? And so actually, I will say one thing. I invested in your brother's startup because I do think that like the WeWorks exist like in these big buildings in big downtown areas. I was like, I think we need a WeWork type environment out in the suburbs. And again, they're kind of townships kind of getting their feet underneath them. But like, I think a township in one of Houston's suburbs, like Sugarland, would be much more successful than like in our downtown area.
Yeah.
So again, like think about things that could be improved, like toilet seats, and then think about servicing where people are going, which is the suburbs.
Yeah. No, I like that. And this may be TMI, but one of my favorite products was what they call a bidet let. I think it attaches to the toilet and it would make your life so much better. So
Look, I'm glad we're
go and
just
get a Tushy. Maybe Tushy's going to advertise on this.
yeah, or squatty potty. I mean, we could just keep going down this path. I'm sure that your students are tuning out at start talking about toilets for 5 minutes at that point. Out.
Well, no, and I think going back to the suburbs thing, I mean, look at like DoorDash, they really went and thought about suburb first. And because I think they were thinking about, all right, COVID's happening, people are going to move out into the suburbs. Like, how do we go and beat Uber Eats to that market? And yeah, and I think with Township, you've got this sort of uniquely, purely human experience. And I think you're in the world of live sports. People are craving that more and more. So yeah, lots of fodder there. So, okay, you've been at running Eventellect for some time now. What would you say has just been your biggest learning lesson from being an entrepreneur?
Well, so one of the biggest lessons, you use the term running, I would say that my operating partner Ignacio is more the one running the business and George and I might be more on the strategic side. So I think kind of like understanding where like the term leverage really makes a lot of sense. Like where's the best use of leverage? Like where are you creating leverage? And 2000 13 till the pandemic, my most value was out on the road being in front of customers and doing 200 nights a year in hotels. And don't get me wrong, there's a huge cost to that. So I do think that, kind of understanding, where you're creating value, really matters, being flexible and being willing to, step up your ego or dial down your ego to fit the role that you need. And I do think that, one thing that we hadn't touched, and I've referenced my partner now a few times, and then the two other, there's three of us that own the business. Like, I was much more on the sales and marketing side, and he is much more on the numbers side. And I couldn't fathom having started something without a partner. And maybe that's why that quilt business failed, is that it was just me. And so I do think that maybe kind of getting back to, the core matter is like, who are the, can 1 + 1 = 3? And I think that with the three partners we have, it's like 1 + 1 + 1 equals like 7 in some cases. So that might be another, piece of advice.
I love that. At Stacks, we've got a value that is unified in our diversity. And it's really about bringing together different perspectives and skill sets to teams, functions, et cetera, because you can draw on that and really, when the different strengths come together behind a common goal or a shared goal, there's really no, stopping to what you can do. So I really like that. So we talked about, of course, starting new businesses, going and launching things. Beyond that, and what I'm looking for here from you is advice to the audience around maybe just how to operate in the world as a person. Because yes, there is the thing, your product or service you're trying to do, but especially at the early stage, let's say you want a business partner or an investor, it's really about the who you are too, right? Like they say, betting on the jockey. So any thoughts there?
Yeah. So I mean, like, look, there's the expression, your network is your net worth. And I think there's some truth to that. I do think that like finding the right way to network, like going to network events is like actually like the worst way to build your network. Like, I mean, I hate to say it like that. I mean, I just think it is. I think building your network via adding value, just for in terms of my personal relationships, the secondary market was so confusing to these team presidents, team owners, team executives. We were really, quite frankly, because of where we were in the space, there had been all these kind of, bad actors who were making money in the shadows and corners. They really weren't willing or open to talk to team executives about like how everything worked and like how inventory is posted in real time on dozens of websites. Like the fact that that happened, actually it didn't make sense to like, team owners or team presidents. Like our willingness just to sit with them and say like, this is how this works, got us just a lot of credibility and got us early relationships. And then today it's funny, like I have team owners and team presidents reach out to me like, hey, I heard from in the office that like you're the guy that collects cards and like my kid's getting into it. Like I will FaceTime with someone's kid to educate them on sports cards because it helps the relationship. Now, look, I've been very passionate about ticketing, so it didn't feel like work sitting with someone for an hour talking about how tickets flow from one place to another. It doesn't feel like work talking to a 9-year-old about his card collection because I've got passion. So, I mean, I think that would probably be like, I couldn't do it if this was like about like motorcycle repair. I don't have a passion for riding motorcycles, right? So, like, I think that's probably core. So adding value through sharing knowledge and trying to do it in a way where you're not coming off as a know-it-all, but like, because I will say I also learn all this stuff. Like I get Eventellect's not a marketplace. You can't go to eventellect.com and buy tickets, but people still reach out looking for guidance. And like, they're shocked at how enthused and how much I want to help. Cause it's like, yeah, me looking at tickets for this venue, I get smarter doing it. Right. So, and I see these markets and I'm getting engaged and I'm learning about new premium spaces and venues. And so just being willing to like share what you have to share and doing it in a way that is kind of, open is certainly a big key to kind of networking and kind of building rapport. And I think that, the other thing that comes to mind is my stepdad was a career salesman. And the number one lesson in sales is show up. And you might take that for granted. And I do think that we're now, I will say now that Zoom is so common that we are seeing more people realizing that they can set themselves apart by showing up in person. But I was shocked. We were involved in an RFP with a key NFL team in like 2015. And we won the RFP, and they said it was almost exclusively because we were the only vendor who showed up in person. And this is before Zoom was ubiquitous. So I was shocked that I heard that.
I still remember you giving me that advice years ago, which is just show up, like put on the suit and shake a hand and be there. And yeah, I love that advice too.
Well, and related to that, I did a bad job at Career Builder of taking meetings just to like take the meetings. And some people would give you meetings, making sure that like why you're there, like sending an agenda ahead of time. And a lot of people like, you don't want them to unhook the meeting. No, you do want to give them an opportunity to unhook the meeting because it's better to make sure things are framed up properly for a successful meeting than being like, oh, great, I got this meeting with this VP of some company, or I got this meeting with this banker. I don't want to ruin it. No, no, no. Make sure your intentions are very clear about why that meeting's happening. It'll save you and them like a ton of heartache.
Yeah. Oh, wow, there's so much good stuff in there. But if I had to kind of leave the audience paraphrasing from you is, you know, add value where you can and you sort of go the extra mile. And if you can align it to something that you're actually interested in and passionate about or knowledgeable about, like it's not going to feel like work, right? And then of course, show up where you can, right? Be in person, develop the relationship, and maybe down the road that's going to have a lot of benefits.
Yeah, and I will say there's a balance. Like, as much as I'd love for everyone to be spending their 9 to 5 doing something they're passionate about, is val. And like again, I don't think you can work 30 years the whole time being non-passionate about something. But there might be periods of your time, whether it be like family driven or location driven, where like you just got to take a job. And like I think there's a lot of honor in just taking a job, but also like I tell this to people that want to work in sports, like, oh, I want to get a job with a team, you're really passionate about sports, you're going to like have a much better experience as a season ticket holder than like an entry level employee at that. So like get a good job that pays well enough for you to buy a 20 game plan with your favorite baseball team. And it's going to be a much better use of, and then you can use those tickets to entertain clients in your space. But kind of understanding that trade-off. Like I think passion's a great, guiding star, but if you can't, find yourself a role where you can make enough money and have enough time to then enjoy your passions. And then that might spark, there could be some opportunity that kind of falls out of that.
But so, I had to ask you, you recently got 5 sport goats to sign one piece of paper. Tell us.
Yeah. So originally I bought so I spent a lot of my time looking at auctions, and I mean, it's an unbelievable amount of time, but like there was this autograph album. It's like, at like Disneyland, you can buy an album and Goofy signs a page and then Donald Duck signs the next page. Autograph albums were very popular in the 19th. And I bought an autograph album that had, like there's a Lou Gehrig page, and some of the pages, there was like 6 different autographs on it. But like this Babe Ruth autograph was like smack dab in the middle of the page and no one else had signed it. And I was in the process of getting these autographs authenticated. And I was like, this just will look this Babe Ruth is going to look silly in this, and so I knew I was seeing Tom Brady at a Sotheby's auction the next week. So maybe another tip, like one of the things with all these athletes I engage with or meet, like I try to have a personal gift for them just to break the ice and make things less awkward. And so like with Tom, he was at the auction and I sat behind him and I could tell when he was getting up to leave, and I tapped him on the shoulder and I was like, hey, Tom, don't want you to leave empty handed. And I handed him a ticket from the 1981 NFC Championship game, which he had famously attended. And he was like, "Oh, that's really cool." I was like, "Hey, would you mind signing?" So he's like, "Of course, right?" So like, give, then ask.
Yeah.
There's a sales lesson there. And his eyes lit up when he saw it was Babe Ruth. Wayne Gretzky's a fantastic signer, and I have a relationship with one of his sons. And so like I knew I could get to Wayne. Unfortunately, I didn't get Wayne signed in person, but his sons and his friends helped me get it done. And then Leo Messi does private signings here and there. So like Brady and then Wayne and Leo happened very quickly. And obviously that, a content creator basically did a story about this item and it went viral. And it was actually kind of problematic because I know that, MJ, Michael, is very private and,
It went viral before you had MJ.
it went viral before I had MJ. And look, thankfully, I've got some relationships with people I've done business with them. And so I was just like content. I was like, I'm going to give it 2 years before I even ask for a favor, because there could be an opportunity where our paths cross or there's a natural opportunity. And all these people came out of the woodwork like, oh, I can get to Michael. And I was like, hey, look, like, I got to make this clear. You do not have the right to represent me in this. Like, this is the last thing I want is like someone getting, him getting spooked by hearing from all these random people that may or may not really have like his landscaper. It was very like, oh, I'm cousins with the guy that, it's like, it was literally like stuff like that. But then once the dust settled, the guy I do have a relationship with was like, hey, someone on Jordan's team saw it and he might have some willingness to sign it. I won't get into too many of the details because Michael did say, he's like, I just don't want to see this all over the internet. And I was like, okay. So that gets the kind of arguably the highlight of it. Anyway, I did have a gift for Michael, which totally set the tone. But also, he actually knew who I was from the world of sports ticketing, which was sort of shocking. So it really was like two worlds colliding, like in the most unbelievable of circumstances. But to me, I was like, well, everyone's going to, I keep getting asked about this thing every day, right? Because like, oh, are you going to put LeBron on it? And it's like, also, this is like sports marketing goats. So I will say that like a lot of people talk about Tiger, and I'm like, it's team sports. Tiger, I'm not going to say I'm going to do it, but like Tiger has an argument from a marketing perspective. So
And
anyway,
it's subjective, right? I mean, it is
it is
ultimately it's
subjective.
your piece.
Right. And right. But like if you do Tiger, then I feel like you got to do Serena. Right. And then if you're doing Serena, then you got to do Phelps. So I've started another item that's a bigger piece of paper, quite frankly. But like, I was like, well, Michael doesn't want me to put this on. But Michael, if Tom Brady puts it on the internet, so Tom and I filmed some content at the National Card Collectors Convention. And that video, because I give his team a lot of credit. So again, surround yourself with a good team. His team didn't tell him what he was seeing. They're just like, hey, you've met Patrick a couple times. He got something he wants to show you. And I go, well, you've actually seen it before. It's in a different format. And then him looking and go, no effing way. He said the word, it's bleeped out. Like that reaction was kind of really the cherry on top. It's a guy with 7 Super Bowls who's done everything, met everybody. For to actually get a reaction like that out of Tom was the icing on the cake. And that got 1.5 million views. And then I got to show it to Wayne recently, and the fanatics shared that Wayne got a kick out of it. Wayne loved it. And so I got a picture of Wayne and I holding it as a completed item. And like that got 1.5 million views. And I was at a sports business conference earlier this week. And like, not everyone, but there were like a dozen people like, I know you're probably tired of talking about it. Um, and I'm not like, it's going to be a while for me to get tired. So if you see me
Good.
and you want to talk about it, we can
Yeah.
talk. And maybe I can show you some pictures that I can't post on the internet, not because they're inappropriate, but because I just don't want them on the internet of me and maybe the world's most famous person.
It's such a unique piece, and it shows that if you just get a little creative and you get, a little steadfast in how you can make this thing happen, you can create value. And I know you're not trying to capture that value right now,
I
but
can't sell it.
you've created the value.
Well, and so like to me, one of the other biggest highlights is I've had people reach out and be like, say, I've started a piece of paper from all the famous alums from my college. So like USC has had Will Ferrell and Matt Leinart and like, all these famous people, right? And it's like, that's pretty cool, right? And or maybe famous people from Houston or even just like, your favorite. And it's like, people always say about, you should do basketballs or baseball. Like, well, just a flat piece of paper displays really well, and it's kind of easy to sign. So I've heard of at least a dozen projects that I've inspired, and that's probably been the most rewarding aspect of it. So
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, I know we're coming up on the time, so we've gotten to the all exciting lightning round. Are you ready, Patrick?
yeah.
All right. So what's the best piece of advice you've got for a budding entrepreneur?
I would go back to what I said about understanding time multiplied by money equals leverage. Be aware of those resources.
What about your favorite book or podcast?
Favorite podcast, hands down, How I Built This. I listen to every episode. I'm even a Wondery subscriber, so I get it a couple days early. And I will say the Sarah Blakely episode is one I've re-listened to a bunch of times. And one of the lessons is, like, firstly, she shopped her own product. She went into a Neiman Marcus looking for her product, and it was with the underwear, which is where she didn't want it. And she literally just took the rack and put it next to the cash register. And that's actually probably like the tipping point of how that business became successful. And so, again, that's all the episodes are good, but that's probably my favorite because she's literally giving billions of dollars of tips and just having the boldness to just act like you have the right to put the rack on the cash register, but also she shopped her product. Like, I think that's a huge problem. Like, the number of times I reach out to and by the way, if I see someone has an issue with their website or like, I'll tell them because I know that like they're not shopping their website every day. So yeah, look, just listen to Sarah Blakely's How I Built This and listen to it 5 times, and you're going to pick up on a few things.
And who doesn't want to listen to Guy Raz's voice? He's got quite the host voice. So, all right, last question for you. I mentioned I gave my students some homework to go create money out of nothing. So this sort of side hustle. Thinking about like collector's items, if you were going to give some advice to the audience on where they could go, maybe find something, buy something, and then sell it for higher value down the road, what should we be looking at right now? Pokemon cards? Like what's the...
Yeah, so kind of understanding that, like, if something's at a garage sale or a flea market, it's not going to be authenticated. So you might get like a really low price, but you're taking a risk of it being not genuine or not what it is. So, like, if you're looking for a high risk, high reward probability, there are finds to be had at like garage sales and flea markets. I would say that the biggest opportunity that's still untapped, and this is just based on personal research. So, like, people come to my house, I've got a room where all my collectibles are, and like they're so uniquely drawn to the pop culture stuff. So, like, Saved by the Bell autographed cards, that kind of 1980s nostalgia. I think that finding underpriced or maybe underappreciated nostalgic items from the late 80s and early 90s is possibly where it's at. So I think there's something to be had in digging through the Goodwills, and maybe related. Maybe I'll be more specific. And because Fanatics just launched it, Fanatics is now selling one of one vintage pieces. And I just, I'm friendly with Michael Rubin and have a lot of respect for him and his team. And so I want to support it. So I went online today and I bought 3 vintage Texas Longhorn shirts. They probably sourced them at $50 or for $5, and I paid $50. Finding vintage shirts and understanding which one should be sold like to someone who's going to resell it versus the ones that you might want to authenticate. That might be my best actually specific piece of advice is vintage sportswear. The people are on top of the concert market. You're not going to the Nirvanas that are worth $1,500, like they've been pulled out. But like, I would have paid $100 for the Daryl Strawberry cartoon T-shirt that I wore as a kid. They just didn't have it. So, if someone finds me the vintage Daryl Strawberry in an XL, look, I'll pay $500 if it comes from one of Ryan's students.
You heard it here, folks. Go find your vintage 80s and 90s stuff. Maybe ask your folks, but awesome. Well, Patrick, it's been an absolute pleasure. You're a legend. Thank you for joining me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. And if I can be of any help to your students, have them reach out.
Will do. All right. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks.
Wow. So much good stuff in that conversation. Hopefully you got a lot out of it. If you did, feel free to share with your friends, and I'd love to hear your feedback. You can reach me at rdodds, rdodds, at rollins.edu. Thanks for listening.